Welcome to Upstart Live by PayU. I'm Mansa. I'm a part of the marketing team at PayU. PayU, as you all know, is one of the leading payment service providers. We are across sectors like airlines, SMBs, and of course, the startup community. Upstart and CodeUp is a series that PayU runs, and Upstart is a series for entrepreneurs where we bring in subject matter experts talking about various topics, especially regarding daily operations for a company, right? While CodeUp is for developers. So today we have with us one other subject matter expert, Abhishek, who is the co-founder at GrowthX. So today's session is around growth and running the right growth experiments. We have with us, as I told you, he's here, Abhishek Patil. So Abhishek, without further delay, I do not want to waste any more time on any of the other introductions. Over to you. Thank you so much for being here. Please take it ahead.
Hey, thank you so much, Manasa. Always great to have a conversation. Hey, hello everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in on a busy weekday in the afternoon. I'm sure your midweek troubles have started already. Don't worry, we'll only spend around 40 minutes on just talking about the topic today, and maybe we'll spend most of the time on trying to help you out with your core struggles around experimentation. I'll give a quick intro about me. I think been part of very interesting startups, Cred, Dunzo, been constantly building and growing products across the product domain, largely consumer. Have worked on almost every e-commerce player back in 16, 17 with Socrati. And yeah, I think GrowthX has been very interesting. We'll talk more about GrowthX at the end. But I think super excited. Grab a pen and paper. You might need it to take some notes down if that's helping you. A few of the things that we'll also discuss, you will can apply like literally right after this session on your own products. So if you're struggling with core experimentation and picking the right problem statement, I think these next 40 minutes are going to really help you out. And I would really encourage you to use that time to ask a lot of questions. I think that will give us a good flavor and also make this more interacting than just a one-way street. Awesome. Cool. So Mansa, should we get started?
Yes, please,
Awesome.
Abhishek. You can bring up your presentation.
Super. So thanks everyone. I think we'll get started in terms of what today's experimentation masterclass. I would love to call it like that. I think I'm going to put a plug here for GrowthX, right? I think at GrowthX we are trying to create a breed of top growth operators and founders to become the kind of person who can solve almost any growth problem, right? And we are doing it with a framework, with a community. We are trying to impact 100 people every 8 weeks. That's how the program runs. And if you have spoken to anybody at GrowthX, anyone who has done GrowthX experience, they will be an evangelist if you ask them how's the experience. And if you're really struggling at growth, or even have got a growth team but not able to crack the code, maybe you want to check out GrowthX. I think one of the key things at GrowthX is the kind of diversity that we bring to the table. We have companies from pre-PMF to public companies. We see a very interesting combination of product, marketing, founders, and we also see some of the interesting minds across the country, which we call them misfits. They're not really into product domain, but they still are super great at problem solving. Name a tech company in India, and most probably you'll find them at GrowthX as part of the community. GrowthX experience is largely three things. First is the whole 5 week live experience where we solve for your ability to solve growth problems. The next 3 weeks is where you have got that ability. Can you also solve for your motivation? And can we really help you apply and transform into the kind of person who can solve any and every growth problem? And all of this doesn't end in 8 weeks experience. It starts there. It's essentially is the community for life at GrowthX, and community brings in whole stuff. It's like your big brother or big sister who helps you out with your career journey across the board. Think of it community like that. Uh, just a quick thing, right? Like in the next 40 minutes, I'm also going to get something for you which is quantifiable apart from the learnings that you can get from the next 40 minutes and apply to your own products. You can write, like, pay attention to what we are discussing, make notes. Of course, you can apply them on your product right away. If you publish these notes on what you learned today here in this session, you might end up landing up a 50% scholarship to GrowthX. So that's just a shameless plug that we have. Now, that being said, let's get to the meat of the conversation, right? Now, I would love to understand from people who have logged in. Sorry, I can't see how many people have logged in from this platform, but what problems are you solving this week and why? If you're there, just go ahead and put it in the chat. What are the problems that you're solving this week and why? Why are you solving those problems? Manasa, I'm not sure, but like if the chats are coming here, I can't see any chat. If you can see it, do let me know.
So there's nothing coming in right now,
Got it.
but I think we will wait to see.
Okay, how many people do we have on the session approximately?
I think we have close to about 100 odd.
Oh, that's crazy. 100 people and no messages. That's a first. I'm sure out of 100 people, everyone's solving some problem this week. We'll wait, maybe give people maybe 30 seconds to write it down. Also, anyone who is typing it out, also write down why are you solving those problems, because I would love to understand why you picked a particular problem statement.
Rather generic, but somebody has, it's not at all related to what we are talking right now, but unemployment.
Oh my god, that's like completely tangent. Sorry, I don't think I can solve unemployment on this session. I think it's more about solving experimentation. Okay, cool. I think we'll move on. I think we'll just get to the meat of it, right? But typically, if you are solving problem statements, this is what will typically happen with you, right? You list down all the features, you'll score each of the feature, then you'll throw away everything, right? And then you will build what the upper management tells you. And if you're somebody like this, then pay attention, because the approach that we are talking about today is going to help you out. Create a language to talk to your leaders, create a language to talk to your teams, and even talk to your engineering teams to relatively focus on what problems we should pick as a team and what experiments should we pick. And that's the core that we're going to solve for. And let's bring a structure to the madness of just running experiment. Let's pick the kind of experiment that could really help. We're going to look at a growth equation. And when I say growth equation, don't get bogged down like Alan from The Hangover, where I look at this GIF and I always think of how VCs value seed stage product companies, right? And how they think about valuations. But we're going to look at a simpler equation today. Think of this. Think of any company or any product as revenue generating machine, and the core levers to revenue are essentially a multiplication of total paying customers and their average order value. I've just oversimplified this equation, but of course, like every product will have a different equation in itself. If you think about what's the function, what is really driving paid customers is what's the function of new customers that are coming in, what's the function of retained customers that you have, and how many customers are you getting back as redirected users. New users are essentially a function of, okay, how many customers are you getting from organic channels, how many are getting through referral, paid. If you have more channels, let's say partnerships, it could be product hunt, it could be, I don't know, multiple product integrations that you could have. Retained customers are a function of total existing customers and what's your retention rate. And the last and the most important, I think, after retained customers is resurrected users. What's your churn base? How many total customers you have lost in the process, and how many of them are naturally coming back to your product? So these are the core things, right? And I've just done it for total paying customer. You could do a similar lever diagram for the average order value, right? And we're going to now apply this framework to a real world product. So this is the exact same framework that helped Dunzo go from 100,000 orders to a 1.5 million orders a month in 13 months, right? We're going to look at this equation that a business like Dunzo or a Swiggy or a hyperlocal delivery could potentially use for. So if you look at the core North Star metric for these businesses, it's typically total monthly orders. And total monthly orders are a function of what's the total number of users, paying users, of course, and total average monthly orders per user. So essentially frequency per month, right? Now, if I were to just put some numbers to this, let's say if you have 100,000 orders coming in, and let's say you have 50,000 active users, paying users, and let's say your frequency per user per month is, let's say, 2. So that means that you're getting approximately 100,000 orders because of this equation. Now, if I were to just change this equation and again apply this, right? And why am I saying all of this and why I'm coming to an equation? Because how would you otherwise arrive at, let's say you have 500 experiments as a team to run. How do you decide which experiment do you pick? And how do you focus on that part of the product or marketing, whatever that focus of the organization is? Essentially look at total users. You look at, as I said, new, retained, and redirected users. If you're trying to acquire new users, you look at the sub channels that typically contribute to a new paying customer. And if you look at a new paying customers, you essentially look at what is your top of the funnel, where is your whole traffic coming from, how many people are landing. If you have a play store and an app store for like apps like Swiggy, Dunzo, they typically look at their app stores and play stores. Post that, how many people are installing the app, and after that, how many people are placing, let's say if it's Dunzo, how many people are placing the, let's say, first pizza order, right? I think the question that you need to ask is, okay, if you pick an experiment as a team to optimize for, let's say, users placing an order, which is this part of the funnel, that means you're solving for activation rate. So for every, let's say, 5% improvement in activation rate, that improves your total number of orders, right? So how is it gonna improve your total monthly orders? That means that every piece that I'm showing here, that improves your total monthly orders by an objective number. Let's say I improve the activation rate by 5%, my monthly order, let's say, improve by 1,000. Let's say I improve 5% my store conversion rate, which is number of users landing on an app store or play store and then downloading the app. Let's say that improves by 20%, my monthly orders might increase by 5,000. So every lever here contributes to a single North Star metric. If you have defined a single North Star metric for your own product, you essentially are quantifying potential impact of every experiment that your team doing. And now we can also expand this for other channels. Let's say I've changed that from organic to a referral channel, or that could also happen for an advertising channel, right? And similar metrics could come in. Now let's look at how you think about retained users. One of the key things in retained users is you cannot actually attribute each of the experiment on and predict how much impact they go and do on the total monthly orders. But you can of course get better at these estimation, and I'll talk about this in detail, right? So if you think about like first lever, which is total number of retained customers, is a function of how many like existing customers you have. Existing customers are essentially people who are constantly buying from you, or customers who were new, let's say last month, and now they are making the second or the third purchase, right? So if you have a higher number of new customers and resurrected customer, that will impact your existing users. Now, if you think about the second lever to this, specifically for Dunzo, it will be, let's say, how do you think about frequency, right? Frequency for Dunzo would be, okay, how many use cases Dunzo has? Can it just deliver food? Or can you also deliver grocery? Can it also send documents? Can I also get a bike taxi? Can I also think about, I don't know, ordering a cigarette at 2 a.m. in the night? I think you should think about number of use cases your product has, and that will define how many natural intent the whole product is going to have for a particular user. Also, like if think about this, right? Somebody who's ordering groceries, you're not going to order groceries daily, right? So what's the frequency? Will you order once in a week, few times a week, few times a month? And it will also depend on, if let's say it's not need based. For example, you want to push a category, and let's say you say, okay, you get a 20% off if you order pizza right now. That means you are essentially using a communication channel like a push notification or a WhatsApp opt-in to actually get an incremental order by incentivizing that order. So all of this will define a total active user, and that will define your total monthly order. Everything that I'm showing on the screen, if you put an objective number to those levers, it will impact your total monthly order. And similarly for like a resurrected user, right? On how you think about this. I'm actually going to take a step back and I'm going to focus more on the Q&A. If you have questions around how do you pick an experiment, how do you measure an experiment, and if you have any experimentation struggles. I think we looked at only the part wherein we focus on what experiments to pick. I would love to get understanding on where you are stuck, what are your struggles, and would love to help you out with an approach that might help you. Mansa, I'll stop screen sharing. You can just go ahead and take questions.
I think, Abhishek, while you asked for what problems we are trying to solve, somebody said that they are focusing on lead status to their advisor. So maybe something around that is what they are trying to solve for. So that
Hmm.
would be something that they are talking about.
Sorry, so lead status to advisor. Sorry, I didn't. I need more context on this. Like, is it
So
uh,
they are a part of Bank Sati, and they focus
interesting?
on providing lead status to their advisors. So this question, this answer came in when you asked what problems they are trying to solve. So could be.
Interesting, interesting. Uh, okay. So I think lead status. So you're essentially solving a conversion problem, right? Now I need way more context. Actually opened Bank Sathi on another tab, and I'm just trying to understand what this product does. It's essentially earn money by selling loans. Okay, that's interesting. That's a Misho model for fintech, is what I think. Very interesting problem statement. So who asked this question? Let me figure out who's
Was
Sarvesh, right?
Yeah, it was Sarvesh Singh. Okay, somebody is asking, does every experiment have to track every single user?
Uh, I don't think so. Every experiment have to track every single user. I think you need to pick a sample set of users while running an experiment. Let's say you have 1 million customers. You're not going to run an experiment on the whole million, right? You're going to only focus on, let's say, picking a statistically significant sample size. Go and Google this term called statistical significance, right? Maybe we'll pick 5,000, 10,000 users and run a A/B test on test versus control and just try to understand, okay, does this experiment really gives you the result that you're trying to assess? Hope that answers whoever asked this. Do we have more questions? Hey, hi, Mona Lisa. So great to see you too. I can't see you though, but thanks a lot for that comment.
We have a question. So Rahul asks, Rahul Agarwal, I think you know him. How do you validate your use cases?
So validation is essentially building conviction, right? You can build conviction using multiple ways. Let's say, for example, you can look at your funnel rates. So one of the key things is looking at funnels, and every product domain has certain benchmarks on funnel rates, right? For example, no fintech product can have like a 70% activation rate, right? Most will have under 50%. And if your is under 10%, oh, that's a red flag, right? Because then people are signing up. So first is look at benchmarks. Second is one of my key learning across the products that I've worked on is you do user calling. A lot of time what users talks about, they of course talk about the problem and the solution, ignore the solution and try to understand the problem that they're saying, right? I think that if your hypothesis is built from those from those calls, that's the second signal. Third is, if you're a product company, you will have customers leaving review across the board. You'll have customers on, I don't know, if a Play Store, Product Hunt, G2 Crowd, so many places, right? Try to understand what they're saying. What are the keywords there? What are they saying? That your service sucks? Are you solving a problem statement there? Or are you saying, okay, your product is too pricey, right? And that's why I've stopped using a product because I can't afford it, right? So all of these signals will build an hypothesis for you. Another way you can do it is think of like a product. Let's assume that you are, let's say, LinkedIn, right? And we are also streaming on LinkedIn this, right? So imagine that LinkedIn copied the stories feature from Snapchat. So they actually took another market signal where there's a higher adoption, and they applied it to your own product because they said, okay, if it works on the similar user on a different platform, it could also work on professional. So that's a hypothesis which failed miserably. But I think that's another way that you could look at for validating. Another thing to look for while validation is you never validate with your only power users. If your hypothesis is only for power user, then it's fine. But if your hypothesis is very generalized, should not just validate with power user, but also look at your casual users, people that use your product very seldomly, right? I think that's one of the key things that you on validating the use cases. Hope that long answer gave some understanding to Rahul. Rahul is a growth expert, by the way. I think he's in GX7. Awesome. Sarvesh is okay. We are dark store grocery delivery company. How do you solve operation cost? I'm not sure who asked this question because only I can see his LinkedIn user. Sorry, I can't help you. How do you solve operation costs for a dark store in a grocery delivery? I don't see that as my expertise. Okay. Do we have any more questions? Folks, if you have questions around how do you run experiments, your team struggles, if you have not been able to build successful experiment, go ahead, ask your questions. Maybe give more context on the question. I think that would really help give a better answer, because I literally have a small 2-line written and I have to give an answer on that. So maybe add more information that will help me out.
Absolutely. So, Abhishek, getting a question from here. How about building the right team that already knows what sort of things to go about with? How does one go about with that? Instead
Okay.
of
So
running time and again new experiments to get there, right? How about just finding the right sort of people who have done it before and then picking them up, and how does that work?
interesting. I think you, Manasa, you and I were just talking about this backstage on how you pick teams. I think there are two ways to go about it. One is if you are a scaled company, then essentially you're not hiring generalists anymore and you're hiring specialists and leaders. So I will leave the leaders part aside because that's very subjective in terms of what product you pick. But if you're hiring for specialists, you need to really understand what are the core growth levers. And we looked at the growth equation, right? You need to understand, is retention going to the keep up for your growth, or is it pricing? Is it, I don't know, it's hundreds of things, right? Hire people who are really good at that one lever and okay on other levers. You can't hire somebody who's okay at that one core lever that's going to change the trajectory on growth. I think that's the most important lesson I have got across the companies that I've worked on. If you are in a consumer company, mostly community or digital or referral or content or retention is going to be the key. If you're in a B2B company, you need to really understand product led sales. So if you're selling at higher price points, you need product led sales. If you are selling at a lower price points, that means you definitely want to focus on how do you do product led growth for even a consumer SaaS, right? And those levers are very different. So it completely depends on what your this like next 2-year plan is on how you want to grow. I think that's a founder's and CXO responsibility to figure that out before even hiring the first person in that team. But yeah, that's how you think about it.
Sarvesh has a follow-up question. Abhishek would like to know from you your take on in-app notifications and push notifications.
Okay, that I don't know about what's my take. Like, how do I like? It's not binary, right? Like, it's not like you shouldn't do it. You should do it. I think, Sarvesh, you should think about this like this. We always talk about sending communications and talking to customers more than figuring out who should we talk to, why have they stopped using the product, and why don't we have triggers in our own product when they use it for the one time, why are they not naturally coming back for the second time. So it's also the equation of, okay, are you giving them a world class experience, are you also putting some triggers that helps them come for the next transaction, and third is, what is your top of the mind awareness. And push notification can't stall for top of the mind awareness or even mind share. I think that those are like some 2010 ideas which is still roaming around, right? I think you need to really figure out why you are reaching out to a customer, what is the marketing hook that will work for them, and what were the problems they stopped using a product. And this is 95% of the work. 5% is, okay, you figure out what's WhatsApp or push notification or email or SMS, whatever those channels are, or paid marketing to actually engage with that user. But I think too much noise in the ecosystem around marketing tools and too little noise around really figuring out why people are churning, why they have stopped using. I think we should focus more on that.
I think that ends the question and answers over here. I
Awesome.
could go back to the present. Oh, okay.
Okay, we
Again,
have.
yes. How different is the growth journey between SaaS or tech and a business process as a service?
I'm no expert in this on business process as a service. I don't think I'm the expert. You should definitely figure out better people than me at this to figure it out. Cool, awesome.
Then I
But
think we can
that's
go.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the overall content, Manasa. We don't have more content. I think that's
Okay. Yes.
we
So
just picked up the whole experimentation bit. If like we can maybe take few more questions, maybe 2 or 3 questions, and then we can conclude on just experimentation. If people who are on the live stream just want to put down a question on your experimentation struggle, happy to take 2 questions quickly, and then we can conclude. I think this is my first time doing something where I'm not directly looking at faces. Because at
yeah,
GrowthX, it's always on a Zoom live meeting, even if with 1,000 people, right? Like even GrowthX demo days are like live interaction. You can literally see the other person. But I think
that
it's
happens with a lot of our speakers. So before we had this thing where we used to use blue jeans, but right now with this, at least there's one other person that is the host or the other speakers with you. So that's why we started using this.
Yeah, I think that's definitely I think need a better solution though to like just get that human element. It's not great to look at just chats and just do a single way conversation. But I think yeah, I think that's all. I don't see any questions coming. I think let's conclude.
Absolutely. Abhishek, would you want to add anything else on that? Maybe a little more around the other topics that we discussed that we could talk about here, right? So something a
Sure,
little
sure.
more, maybe a 5 minute session, and then we close it with that.
Sure, sure. So I think the other pieces which we couldn't cover was about like setting right experiments, right? I think few of my self reflections have been around. Uh, First important thing if you're running experiments is pick a metric that impacts the growth equation, right? That's for step number one. Step number two is have a hypothesis built, and the way you build hypothesis, I think I answered somebody's question here, right? Which is how do you validate and build an hypothesis? Do user calling, try to understand your funnel, try to benchmark your funnel, think about how could you look at other market signals. What are the, like I gave you the Snapchat versus LinkedIn stories example. Think about where you can run hypothesis. Once you have all the hypothesis, talk about which hypothesis has the highest impact on the end equation, right? Also, what takes least time, what takes how much effort, where what experiments will require an engineering effort, a product effort, a design effort, an analytics effort. Also do that math, right? Like, and this pretty classical RICE framework to understand that. Once you do that, when you run the experiment, you run it in with a clear focus that, and this will be communicated to the team, right? Like, what are we chasing with this experiment? And it should be written somewhere, like there should be a document which says, "Oh, this is how success would look like," and not some random number that changes after that experiment and we say, oh, because of this experiment these 5 things changed. But did you wanted them to change, right? And I think one of the also nuance is a lot of people think that experiments are hacks. Trust me, there is no hacks in this business on product and growth, right? It's pure processes. You consistently have to get a user driven or a product driven hypothesis, test it out on small base and statistically significant base with test and control. Once you understand that, it gives you a blip, right? Like every experiment will either work or it won't work or it will do nothing, right? And if it gives a blip, see if that blip remains over a long period of time, right? I think that's more important. And another nuance is, let's say a lot of people do for example top of the funnel experimentation, right? They say that, oh, our product improved top of the funnel by 80x, or I don't know, some random multipliers, right? And everyone is doing it. Did it impact your retention, for example? Okay, did it impact your user quality? Were less numbers paying you? Like, did your average order value drop? Did less number of people who retained eventually paid for your services? Like, look at all the secondary metrics when you run an experimentation on some different parts of product, right? I think that's more important in general, to look at experimentation as a holistic and not like, oh, I hit my OKR and I don't care about other people's OKR. I think that's not a great way to look at experiment, because nobody's winning in that business, right? And everyone's losing, right? So I think that's one of the key things while running experiment. And you should have typically 3 core people in your team who are running experiments, and typically the growth team structure. One super awesome person on analytics who really understands nuances of how to set dashboards, how to automate stuff, how do you look at controlled environments for experiments, make sure that not two teams are running experiment on a single user and that's overlap, because both experiments will be invalid. Also look at, do you have a great product person who understands how to talk to a customer, how do you build hypothesis, how build conviction on those hypotheses, how do you really run this team, right? And you definitely need a marketer who understands what the marketing pitch should be, what the product pitch should be, like how the copy should go on product versus marketing, and so on and so forth, and a lot more about how would the whole campaign look like if you're doing something on marketing in general. I think these are the super important pieces while running experiments. Also having like a and if there are engineers who have logged in, you should definitely think through, like, does your infra supports it? Because a lot of times experiments become void because your infra just sucks, right? I think that's one of the key reasons also, how to look at running experiment with a stable infrastructure on tech side. I think these are a few of the nuances that you should definitely talk about and think through while running them.
Absolutely. I think that was a great conclusion to this conversation. The LinkedIn user again has a question: most important variables to take care of in any experiment.
Interesting. That's a very open-ended question. I'll still try to attempt it. Most important variables. I think one I already touched upon, which is get a unbiased test and control user sample, right? And maybe Google this term called statistical significance. You'll find a bunch of examples. Second is, I think if you are trying to change one metric, make sure that your experiment impacts that metric, right? If you see any other metrics changing, that's not your credit. That's just your mistake, or that must be some natural phenomena, right? So I think that's second. And third is, like, when you're running multiple experiments, make sure that nobody is making other experiments void. I think these are the few signals that you should definitely take care of while running an experiment. And the last is document, right? Ask yourself or your team, how many experiments have they run and how many people have a documentation of the results and what they did as a next action after an experiment has been concluded, right? If there is no next action, that means you don't know, do you need to scale this, do you need to shut it down, do you need to scale it down, do you need to do another experiment to validate the first one? Like, there should be some, like, every experiment doc should have a next action item on what happens next, right? It shouldn't be a closure document, it should be a continuation document. I think these are the few things that you could look at.
I think that sounds about great. Thank you, Abhishek, for being a part of this. I like that it was a short conversation, but it really made a lot of sense. So, thank you so much to the audience as well. We had a few questions, and thank you for coming back with your follow-up questions, for making this much more interesting. So, Abhishek, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Manasa. Thanks a lot, everyone who tuned in. It was great, shorter conversation on a Tuesday afternoon. I think I had fun. Would have loved if I got more questions. I think at GrowthX I get like hundreds of questions. So not very familiar with this platform. I hope it was a good attempt, just talking to people. Thank you so much, Mansa, for doing this. I'm really excited for you guys building interesting products for the ecosystem. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Abhishek. See you.